closer to the mic. There you go.
Is that a little better?
Yeah.
Welcome to a very special event at Medaille College. My name is Brad Hollingshead. I serve as an Associate Dean in Academic Affairs here at the college, and I'm very pleased to be the host for this evening's event, An Evening with Byron Pitts. I'd like to thank the students, campus educators, and friends of the college who have come to join us this evening. This event supports our freshman summer reading program. So in other words, it supports the first homework assignment that the class of 2015 was given before coming to Medaille College. And I want to take just a moment here to thank some people who have organized it. Of course, something like a freshman summer reading event that is integrated into the classroom as well as into co-curricular activities such as this one takes a highly collaborative effort. So I do, though, just want to identify some individuals who have been central to this effort. And first of all, on the faculty side of things, to Erica Hammond and Michelle Separati, who have organized this event, as well as the entire reading program. I'd also like to thank Carrie Costello, Michelle Cribe, Mary Johnson, Evelyn Hamilton, Kara Kane, and Lisa Marshall, who have worked very hard to, behind the scenes to make sure that this event runs smoothly. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the John R. O'Shea Foundation, who has made it possible for us to bring a speaker of Mr. Pitts' caliber to our campus to talk with our students. And in fact, what I'll add here is that we're starting a little late because Mr. Pitts very much lives the story that we read by him, that he was stepping out on nothing with a number of students over in the library and really taking time to get to know them, to answer their questions, and we certainly did not want to get in the way of that. So I will keep this intro as brief as I can from here. Now, a little bit of context for the summer reading program. The summer reading program is designed to support students' first-year experience in learning communities, which are pairings of courses that are linked together by a common theme. This common theme we call Community 101, and it's about exploring the story of a community. And that theme drives the decision about what book freshmen will read before coming in. And we try to look for works that deal, on the one hand, with the power of narrative itself, with the power of story to shape both our collective and our individual identities. But we also want students to explore books that get into the very notion of community itself. And I think that Mr. Pitts' book is a great fit for that freshman read for several reasons, and not least of which that he is himself an expert storyteller. And as he tells us in the book, he realized early on that that was his purpose in life, to tell stories. And it's often about giving voices to people who would not otherwise have a chance to be heard unless Mr. Pitts gives voice to their story. And he's a very accomplished individual in this area. He serves as the chief national correspondent for CBS Evening News and is a contributing correspondent to 60 Minutes. He has over 20 years of experience in journalism. He's been an embedded reporter in Iraq. He served as the lead correspondent at Ground Zero during 9/11. He's been to Katrina, Afghanistan, Kuwait, and covered the refugee crisis in Kosovo. He's won 2 National Emmy Awards, one for his personal reporting on 9/11. He's also won 6 regional Emmy Awards, 4 Associated Press Awards, and a National Association of Black Journalists Award also for his reporting on 9/11. Now, I'd like to add just a very brief personal reflection on the book and the kinds of issues that it takes up. And one of the things that very much strikes me about the book is that the book is real in many senses of that word. Now, I don't mean that in the sense that it's based on his life, that it's a true story. As a journalist, I'm sure that Mr. Pitts would be the first to tell you that memory is itself a tricky thing, that there's a lot that can get in the way of the event itself and all of the experiences and other stories that provide layers for interpreting that memory. I mean real in the sense that it used to be used in literary studies, the idea of realism, that there is some general truth about the human condition that is captured in that work. And it's in that sense that I think this is a very real book in meaningful ways. Now, at the new student convocation, and this is especially for the freshmen who have joined us today, I began to address the idea of what it means to enter into a community. And I talked about the importance of the term belonging being at the heart of any definition of that term, community. And it means belonging on the one hand in the sense of finding a place, of finding a purpose, of being in an environment where you can thrive and flourish and be successful. And I think there are many ways in which Byron Pitts' story shows us that sense of belonging, that there were people who helped him, as he puts it, tear off certain masks, to quit hiding in a corner, and to become a part of something that was much bigger than himself. And that's at the heart of community, that sense of belonging. But belonging also has something to do with ownership, in the sense that something belongs to me. And when those people in that story have stepped out onto nothing for Mr. Pitts, they enact that particular dimension of community that allowed him to take ownership of his own journey. And he talks about success as having an address, and I've heard him say this now a few times, but it's the idea that the journey matters, but you have to have a destination in mind when you dream. And so what makes this book real for me, and unlike other memoirs that have come out recently, is that the story of success here is about two things. It's about determination and hard work on the one hand, but it also acknowledges the idea that that success is not possible without relationships and networks of support. And so for me, in many ways, it provides a counterpoint to a narrative that is becoming dominant in our culture. A narrative that says we'll be more successful if we strip away our mutual obligations and ties to one another and see ourselves more as egotistical monads in constant competition with one another. We want you to think critically about these stories, the freshmen who come in. We want you to think critically about Mr. Pitts' story, about what I'm saying to you here. But I also hope that you will see that Mr. Pitts' book is a tool for thinking critically about these other narratives, and that it's very real in that sense, and that sense that individual success only comes by pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, rather than, as Mr. Pitts describes it, grabbing onto the shoelaces of some other folks who drag you along, is, I think, a kind of idealism that is not real. That it does take community to be successful, and that community, in fact, makes success meaningful in the end. I've had the good fortune to see Mr. Pitts speak before, so let me, without further ado, please welcome him to the podium.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, good, good. Hello. Hopefully that helps. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you so much, my friend, for the kind introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you all so much for coming out this evening. It's a joy to be here for several reasons. One, I'm so grateful to this wonderful institution for picking my book and allowing the freshman class to read. Thank you so much. I am honored and humbled by that. It's also nice to be at a liberal arts college, a small liberal arts college, because I went to a small liberal arts college, Ohio Wesleyan University, which is about 1,000 students smaller than your school. So I have great affection for young people who attend these kinds of schools, as well as administrators and faculty members who've devoted their professional lives to nurturing young people. I'm also thrilled to be here because this city, Buffalo, reminds me a lot of my hometown. I'm from Baltimore, a working class city where folk know the value of hard work, the value of family. So I feel at home in Buffalo. Also, this is an AFC town, and so Baltimore is an AFC town. So I like that.
There you go.
No bill.
I'm only going to talk for about 20 minutes or so, because we have about an hour total. And then I look forward to opening up to questions so we can have a conversation. One of the things I so love about these opportunities is as a journalist, I spend the bulk of my time asking people questions, oftentimes at the lowest point in their lives. So I am grateful for the opportunity to answer questions. So when we get to that portion, feel free to ask me anything under the sun, and I'll do the best I can to answer it. I want to talk to you for a bit about some things that I think are important, especially for the young people here, the students here. All the students who are here, raise your hand for me.
I'm an alumni.
Hey, there you go. Christine.
Yeah.
Hey, Christine. Christine and I met our way. And so just make sure you show your hand so your professors who said you had to be here, so they'll know that you, in fact, you came. I want to talk to you about a few things. One, about the importance of dreams for the young people here, because I believe deeply in the power of dreams and living dreams. As I said in the introduction, I have this saying that every dream has an address. That isn't enough to just dream, but you have to have a plan in order to get there. As a correspondent for CBS News and now for 60 Minutes, which is my dream job, when I was 18 years old, a freshman at Ohio Wesleyan University, I wrote in my journal that one day I will be a 60 Minutes correspondent. Wow. I wrote that down when I was 18 years old on academic probation. and I've been able to live that dream. So I believe in having dreams and having a course to get there. As a correspondent for CBS News and now for 60 Minutes, I've had the great honor. I've been to 39 countries for CBS News. I've interviewed the last 6 presidents of the United States. I've covered 3 wars. And at last count, I've watched 47 people die. In many ways, as a journalist, I make my living covering death. I was a witness to the Timothy McVeigh execution, the Oklahoma City bomber who was put to death in Terre Haute, Indiana. I know that there's a connection here for people in this audience to that story and to him and to his family. I witnessed a man put to death in the electric chair in Virginia in 1986. I've watched as American service members in places like Iraq and Afghanistan gave their full measure in service to this nation. I saw a 14-year-old boy stoned to death in Afghanistan. I've watched people stabbed, shot. Basically, I've watched people die in almost all of its forms. And I'm okay with it. As I said, that's how I make my living in many ways as a journalist, covering death. But something that I am not comfortable with, something that still pains me, that worries me, is indifference. Because I've learned over the years that if good and decent people do nothing but be indifferent about their lives, about their opportunities, I've learned that indifference can be a deadly weapon. If good and decent people take their gifts and do nothing with them. So part of my message here, especially to the young people, is to not be indifferent about your gifts, about your opportunities. And please know the fact that you have an opportunity to get an education at this wonderful institution, that you are blessed. You're fortunate, regardless of where you come from. If I may ask those of you, like me, if you're the first member of your family to go to college. Anyone here? Yeah. So I would imagine that in some ways, my story is your story, and your story is mine. The joy that comes with that, both the blessing and the burden to be the first member of your family to have the opportunity to go to college. I say that because it is a wonderful opportunity, not purely because of what I do for a living and the things that I've seen. I say that because of my life and where I come from. As many of you know who've read the book, but some folks haven't. Long before I was Byron Pitts of 60 Minutes, program is the longest running news magazine program in the history of television in the United States. It's seen on average by about 13, 18 million people every Sunday. More people watch 60 Minutes than watch the Buffalo Bills on Sunday. But long before I was ever Byron Pitts of 60 Minutes, I was a kid from East Baltimore, a city much like Buffalo. My mother had her first child when she was 17. She had me before she finished high school. I didn't learn to read till I was 12. I stuttered till I was 20. When I was diagnosed as functionally illiterate in middle school, which means I was unable to read at all and to read things out of their context. When I was diagnosed as functionally illiterate, now they ran a series of tests on me to see what the issues were. And I remember when they called my mother and it says, Miss Pitts, we have diagnosed your son Byron. And it's our belief, based on our years of experience and what we've tested Byron, it's our belief that your son is mentally retarded. And we think he should be institutionalized. At the time, my mother had a 10th grade education. She worked at the time at the London Fog Coat Factory. Anyone here have a London Fog coat? Yeah. Right? More than likely, that coat was made by someone like my mother. Now, eventually, my mother went back to school. I met someone here earlier today who's gone back to school with the support of her husband and of her son. I know that story well. My mother went back to school, got her degree in sociology, and spent the bulk of her professional life as a social worker, helping primarily women like herself, single women primarily who were struggling as best they could to raise their families. But at that moment, at that crucible moment in our life as a family, in my life as her son, the experts said, your son is mentally retarded, we think he should be institutionalized. Well, my mother being a stubborn woman, a southern woman, and you know southern women, I would imagine much like Buffalo women, they can be kind of stubborn at times.
Oh, yeah.
My mother said, test him again. And they said, well, didn't you hear what we just said? You think your son is mentally retarded? She says, I heard you, but didn't you hear me? Test him again. They tested me again. A few weeks later, we came back and they said, we're sorry, Miss Pitts. Our diagnosis is the same. But we think Byron is mentally retarded, was the phrase they used at the time. And we think he should be institutionalized. But if you choose not to follow our recommendation, the best we can say is bring him back when he's 18. And my mother said, if I wait until my child is 18, he will be dead or in prison. My son needs help right now. Well, fortunately for me, what my mother lacked in formal education at that time, as I said, she had a 10th grade education. She made up for, as the old folk would say in the South, the Word, the Bible. You see, for all of my life and for most of her life, my mother has worn around her neck a small mustard seed encased in a clear plastic ball on a chain. It has been my mother's daily reminder of the scripture in the book of Matthew that says, if you have faith just the size of a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, mountain, move from here to there, and nothing will be impossible. It is with my mother's mountain-moving faith, her optimism, that she got me the help I needed, and I was able to live my dreams. So young people, part of my message to you today, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how difficult it was for you to get here. It doesn't even really matter how difficult it will be for you to stay here. But take joy in the fact that you are here, that you have the opportunity to live your dreams, and that you are in a special place in our society. Did you know that fewer than 25% of Americans have a college degree? Fewer than 25%. So that when you leave this school on graduation day, you will be part of the elite of the United States because you have the opportunity to get a college degree, and it will change your life, change your family's life. But as you all know, freshmen, it's going to take hard work. I don't know of any shortcuts in life, but hard work. And then if you do work hard, you can achieve them. A bit more about my story, because one of the things you'll learn in life, young people, that struggle comes more than just once, right? I like to say this, so the struggle is like Bebe's kids, right? It isn't just sort of one time it shows up. They come up there 3 or 4 or 5 times in your lifetime. And I certainly had those. Because of my early issues with literacy, I had only read one book for enjoyment by the time I went to college. And perhaps, like some of you, I wasn't as prepared as some people were to be in college. For those of you who work in admissions, who work with students that freshman year, I'm sure you've had students, much like me, who weren't fully prepared to be in college. And that was me. But one of the things I learned in college was reinforced is a sense that if you do what you're supposed to do, good and decent people will come into your life, will step out of nothing. As you know, is the title of my book, and I chose that for a particular reason. As I've mentioned before, I mentioned to you my faith, and I won't go far down that road, but just know in knowing me, that's important to me. I think it was the great New York catcher Yogi Berra who once said, "Always dance with the one that run you." I like that. Always dance with the one that run you. In other words, whatever has allowed you to be successful to this point in your life, hold on to it. And so for me, part of my journey has been my family, has been our faith system. But the title comes from a few years back in my home church in New Jersey, where I live now. It was Women's Day. And the visiting minister that day was a woman. She was talking primarily to the women in the audience. And she said, sometimes women, we have sore feet, you need a manicure or a pedicure. I'm thinking, oh my Lord, what time is it? There's nothing in the sermon for the fellows on, right? Because the whole mani-pedi thing, that's the average guy's thing. But then she said something that took my breath away. She said, in those difficult moments in life, when your Rolodex or your resume, who you know, who your mama knows, isn't enough, that for people of faith, you have to step out. Now, to non-believers, they would say you are stepping out on nothing. But for people of a faith system, you are stepping out to a place where only God is, right? The place in which you can't explain why that good thing happened to you, but it does. So young people, please know that I think if you are a good and decent person, live your life in the right way, that even in those difficult moments, people will come into your life and will step out on nothing for you. I had those examples at Ohio Wesleyan. As I mentioned, I wasn't the best student at all, right? I know that many of you, this great institution, will graduate Phi Beta Kappa, magna cum laude, summa cum laude. I graduated, thank you Lord. I graduated on time. That's as much as I can say from my college experience. In my high school in Baltimore, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. I like to say I had the best of both worlds. I was raised Baptist, educated Catholic. And my high school, I was ranked, I think, 340 out of 345 students, near the bottom of my class my freshman year. When I graduated, I was graduating in the top 40 in my class. Still not the best student on campus, but the best student I could be. So when I got to Ohio Wesleyan, which was the best school I could get into, and I knew right away that I wanted to be a writer. I thought I was a pretty decent writer coming out of high school. I worked in my high school newspaper. Freshman year, I take freshman English. Anybody here take freshman English right now?
Yeah.
It can be a killer, right? Sometimes. Who knew? I'm taking freshman English, and after the first semester, being, I thought, a good writer and wanting to be a journalist someday, I got an F. I failed freshman English the fall of my freshman year. Go figure. An F in English an hour for 60 minutes. Right? God has a sense of humor. So I got an F. An example of how slow I am then and now. Because I was raised to believe if you just work hard enough, right, that you can overcome anything. So I thought if I just work a little harder, I'll do better next semester. So I took the same class with the same professor the next semester. About midway through the semester, this professor was passing out midterm exams in blue books. I don't know why he used blue books, but that was what we had. Passed out his blue books. And he announced in my class, about 20-some students. He says, Mr. Pitts, with this bold, professorial voice, he said, Mr. Pitts, congratulations, your best work thus far, D+. Come see me after class. I was 18 years old, raised to respect authority. I said, yes, sir. Followed him to his office. He said, Mr. Pitts, don't sit down, this won't take long. He said, Mr. Pitts, it is my opinion as a tenured professor here that you are now Ohio Wesleyan University material. I think you're wasting my time and government's money. I think you should leave. Yes, sir. I left this office and went next door to the admissions office to get the papers to withdraw from college. Like those of you who raised your hand who said you are the first members of your family to go to college. As I said, you know the joy and pride, right? Because your folk, your mom, your dad, your grandma, they brag on you, right? Because they know what this opportunity means for you. So that is the blessing part of it, right? But it can also be a burden. Because not only are you carrying your dreams, you're carrying the dreams of your family, of the folk in your community, classmates back home who are looking to you to be successful in college, to let them know that they too someday can be successful in college. So when I walked over to the admissions office to begin filling out papers to leave school, I began to cry because I was mindful of not only was I letting go of my dreams, but the dreams of my family, people who cared for me. Now, these weren't Hollywood tears. These were shoulder-shaking, head-bobbing, nose-running kind of tears. Anybody ever cry like that?
Yeah.
A couple of fellas raise their hand. Nothing wrong with crying. Because I knew what that moment meant. So as I'm there weeping, filling out this paper, it was a cold day in the wintertime in Ohio, this stranger walked by. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. But she simply said, "Young man, what's wrong?" And she sat down and talked with me for about 20 minutes. My friends, never underestimate the power of a kind word. Whether you are an administrator, a faculty member, a resident of this community, a student here, words matter. You can impact someone's life, impact your own life. So she sat down with me, we talked for about 20 minutes, and she said, "Well, before you leave," she didn't say, "Don't leave." She said, "Before you leave, come see me tomorrow." You know how sometimes when you're crying really hard, you can't hear? Right? Your hearing goes away for some reason. Well, I didn't remember her name, but I remembered her spirit. And I remember where she said I should go to see her the next day. So I went and talked with her. Come to find out, this stranger was actually a professor at Ohio Wesleyan. She was a first-year professor, an English professor. Her name is Ulla Lewis. I like to say that Ulla didn't simply change my life. She saved my life. She worked with me after hours to help me get up to speed so I could be ready for college. Interesting thing about Ulla, and it's an example of how for all of us, I believe that strength comes from struggle, right? Any bad thing that occurs to us in life, if we use it, can strengthen us for life that comes afterwards. And that a friend of mine, Robin Roberts, who's an anchor of Good Morning America, wrote this wonderful book about her life. She had this great quotation from her mother. Her mother always encouraged her to let her tests be her testimony. I like that. That use whatever bad thing may have happened to you, not just to strengthen yourself, but maybe to encourage someone else through their struggle. And in many ways, that's what Ulla did. Because Ulla was from the country of the Stone Age, a country in Europe ravaged during World War II, first by the Russians, then by the Germans. She spent the bulk of her early years in refugee camps in Poland and parts of Eastern Europe. Ulla and her family were brought to Roxbury, Massachusetts by the Lutheran Church in the late 1940s. It is fair to say that Roxbury, Massachusetts in the late 1940s, 1950s was a difficult environment for a blue-eyed, blonde-haired white girl. So in many ways, Ulla had experienced struggle. She had experienced discrimination. She had experienced people thinking less of her in her life. So maybe in some ways she recognized it in me when she saw me and stopped to help me. Ulla is someone who stepped out on nothing to help me. You know, it doesn't just have to be an adult, right? Someone with gray hair, in my case, no hair, to help me. All of us have the ability in our lives to nurture someone else, to help someone else. My very best friend in college, his name is Peter Holtby, right? Those of you who read the book know about Pete. Pete passed away about 2 years ago now from cancer. That's a story for another time. But when Pete and I were both freshmen at Ohio Wesleyan, as I said, I'm from East Baltimore, and Pete is from Minnetonka, Minnesota. It's fair to say I had never met anyone from Minnetonka, and Pete had never met anyone from East Baltimore, if you know what I'm saying. Pete and I became fast friends. And early in my freshman year in college, Pete and I were talking one night, and Pete said, "Yo, baby boy, you know how when you're in college, and trust me, yours is not the first generation to do this. You know how freshman year in college, you're away from home for the first time, no one's telling you what time to go to bed. So you tend to stay up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning quite often, right? And maybe you're sitting around with your friends, drinking your favorite beverage, eating cold pizza. I'm assuming it's a legal beverage or legally allowed. Legally allowed. And you're solving the world's problems, right? So that's what Pete and I, some friends and I were doing. So afterwards, Pete said, "Baby boy, why is your vocabulary so limited?" And I explained to Pete my early issues with literacy. At the time, I was 17 years old. Pete was 18 years old. And when I explained to Pete my early struggles with reading, because Pete came from a upper middle class family, his issues were not my issues. My issues were not Pete's. But after that conversation, I explained Pete my background. Pete said, "Here you go, baby boy. Here's what we're going to do. Every day for the next 4 years, because you will graduate in 4 years, I'm going to give you a new word in the dictionary. I want you to say it out loud, spell it, use it in a sentence. We did that every single day for 4 years. Pete didn't have much to give me as a fellow freshman, but he gave me access to his brilliant mind. Pete is someone else who stepped out on nothing to help me. So young people, know that you too have the opportunity while you're in college to step out for other people. That it can't all just be about you and what your needs are. My grandmother, my late grandmother, had a wonderful saying. She said, the only way that God can give you more is if you open up your arms and give away what you have. I like that. And my grandmother believes in service. I believe in service. I believe in that we're all connected. As was mentioned in the introduction, I don't believe in the bootstrap philosophy. I have not gotten to where I've gotten in my life professionally by myself. There were wonderful people who spoke kind words to me, who encouraged me along the way, who kicked my butt when my butt needed to be kicked, but who were there to support me. And so young people, know that those same kinds of resources are available to you. And I especially like coming to places like this because I understand that there are a number of you whose story is like mine compared to some other places I might go. I remember oftentimes thinking, because I went to a small liberal arts college, I wouldn't be as positioned as well as the people who went to the Syracuses or the North Carolinas or the University of Missouri, the huge schools or the Harvards or Yale Law schools. And God bless those places. Those are great places. But it's funny how things work. Right now, I have a team of people who work with me and for me, right? I mean, they report to me. One went to Boston College, one went to Harvard, one went to Princeton, one went to Brown. That always sort of amuses me that those really smart people now have to sort of answer to me. But it is an example that it doesn't matter what size school you went to. If you apply yourself and get the things that you need to get from an institution. Last point I want to make with you before I open up for questions. As I said earlier, every dream has an address. For the students here, raise your hand if you live on campus. Okay? All right. Raise your hand if you live on campus. Okay. All right. Looks like maybe 50-50, maybe leaning a little bit more to those who live on campus. Okay. We have to debate that, whether you live on campus. Now, next question. Raise your hand if you have no idea how you'll get back to your dorm or apartment or home tonight. Raise your hand. You have no idea how you're going to get back to your dorm or home tonight. All right? Okay. That's a good sign, right? That almost everyone knows they got a plan how to get there. I think career in life is the same way, right? That the only way you get to where you want to go is if you know where you're trying to get to. Right? Does that make sense? I believe in my faith tradition is a saying that says, say it and claim it. Say it and claim it. That if you want something for your life, say it out loud and claim it. Claim it in your spirit, if that makes sense to you. And one of the things I found, if you say things out loud, those empowering words out loud, you can hear. But people who care about you will also hear. And they can buy into it. They can encourage you along the way. Okay? So I believe in saying it out loud. Every dream has an address. Right? I believe it. I always encourage young people, college students like yourself, to dream bold and outrageous dreams. That your dream for yourself, it seems to me, should be so outrageous that when people hear it, they laugh. Right? It should be just that crazy, I believe. Because, as I mentioned earlier, my freshman year at Ohio was on academic probation. I've kept a journal since I was 12 years old, when I finally learned to actually 13 years old, I learned to be more comfortable with words and language. I kept a journal. My mother insisted that all of her kids keep journals. Perhaps many of you have moms like my mother. Someone asked my mother once how she was able, as a single parent, divorcee. She likes me to add that one, that she was divorced. How was she able to send 3 kids to college off of her modest income? My mother said it was simple. I told each child you would go to college or I will beat you to death. Perhaps some of you have similar inspiration back home. Every dream has an address. You have to have a plan. And so that's what I did. I sort of mapped out my course. And my dream was outrageous. Freshman year at Ohio Wesleyan, I wrote in my journal, I was telling some friends one night, we were out late, drinking our favorite beverage, eating cold pizza, Domino's pizza. And someone said, so Byron, what do you want to do? I said, well, my dream is to be on 60 Minutes someday. Like, come on, bro. You're on academic probation. You gotta get past freshman English first, right? And I'm like, okay, that's true. But I had some place I was trying to get to. And here, my friends, I think there are a couple of valuable reasons why I think you should have that vision. You should know at 17, 18, 19 years old, you should already have or be in the midst of forming your own dream, your own plan, your own vision, and mapping it out. Right? Because here's the value of two things. On those difficult days along the way when you have self-doubt, as many as you may have now in college as a freshman, if you know where you're trying to get to, along the way, in those moments of doubt, you can look back and say, okay, I'm okay. I understand where I am, where I've been, where I have to get to. On those days in which life is going great, as my kids would say, you are all that and a bowl of chips, right? When you're feeling kind of confident, if not cocky about yourself. If you have a sense of where you're trying to get to, you will be humbled by where you are. That, okay, life is grand at this moment, but I still have a plan. I believe deeply, young people, in having a plan for yourself. A 6 months plan, a 1 year plan, a 5 year plan, a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan. It's my belief, just one guy's opinion, that if you don't know where you want to be in 20 years, it's going to be that much more difficult to be there, to get there. Many people who I know who have been successful, however you measure success, in their given profession, are people who had a vision how they get there. If you talk, for instance, to any member of the Buffalo Bills football team, having a pretty good year so far. If you talk to any, I guess the folk here who don't like the Bills. That if you talk to any member of that team, and you said, when did you first dream of playing in the NFL? I doubt if any of them would say, you know what, I was a senior in college, spring of my senior year, just kind of kicking it, and I thought, what the hell, I'll try for NFL, right? More than likely, they had that dream, that vision for themselves when they were 8, 9, 10 years old, right? A wonderful book I encourage you to read since you've read mine already is this book called Outliers, written by Malcolm Gladwell. I understand there are copies of it on campus. It is a wonderful read. I know when you're in college, you have a ton of stuff you have to read already, but if you find time, Outliers is a wonderful book because it talks about the traits of what makes someone successful, beyond even a normal definition of success. People who are outliers, extremely successful. And they looked at world-class hockey players, violinists, business people. And what they found, the one quality they all had in common, it wasn't intellect, though some of them were very smart. Others, not so much. It wasn't where they came from. Some were children of means. Some weren't. The one thing they all had in common was that each of them had spent at least 10,000 hours devoted to the one thing they wanted to do. 10,000 hours, right? For instance, Bill Gates, the richest man in the world. When Bill Gates was in high school, as it turned out, there were only 2 places in the United States where a person at that time had access to computer hardware. It was at the University of Michigan and at his high school, because he went to this high school that had means and resources. They provided that. So in high school, in college, before he dropped out, though I'm not advocating anyone drop out of school, he began to get the kind of knowledge, experience that he needed. Does that make sense? It takes the one common trait of all these extremely successful people was they had invested 10,000 hours into what they wanted to do with their life. So I believe in having a plan. I have daughters. I always tell my daughters, if you meet a guy, hopefully you meet him at church, but if not, if you meet him, say, at a club or at a party, and you're, doing what you guys do at parties, right? And you have a conversation. You ask the young man, so what do you do? If that young man can't say in a sentence, I'm a student, I'm working, I'm finding a cure for cancer, if he can't answer in a sentence what he's doing, he ain't doing anything. You leave him alone and find somebody else. Because not only must your dream have an address, it has to be clear clear to you. You have to be able to articulate it in a sentence. Right? Does that make sense? Because again, I said language matters. Last thing I want to say to you about this notion about your success, and I pray for greatness for all of you, not just to do okay, to do fine, but to do great things with your life, right? And great things doesn't necessarily mean make a lot of money, but to be successful. People ask me oftentimes, what was my biggest motivation for wanting to be on 60 Minutes? I said my motivations were twofold. One, I simply wanted to make my mother proud. I'm a mama's boy. Any mama's boys in the audience? There you go. All right, brother. Right? I'm a mama's boy. So it means a great deal to me for my mother to be proud of me. I would imagine for some of you, there were people in my community, in my neighborhood, who criticized my mother for working 2 or 3 jobs to make sure I went to college. I would imagine there might be some of you whose parents are criticized, especially in these tough economic times, for sacrificing so hard to put you in college. I would imagine many of you work jobs, and people who you work with may criticize you for going to school, working 20, 30 hours a week, because they see it as a waste of time. I had this experience as a young person. When I was in high school, I lied about my age to get a better paying job. I was about 15, 16 years old, said I was 18 years old, to get a higher paying job, cutting grass on the highway. Any of you been in the car, driving down the interstate, you see guys with like orange shirts on, cutting the grass, picking up trash? That was me. That was my job in high school and college. In fact, when I went to college at Ohio Wesleyan, I kept my orange shirt. And whenever I had a test, because I'm sort of a visual learner, whenever I took a test, I wore my orange shirt to class. People were like, yo, what's up, B? I know, brother, you ain't got much money, but that orange shirt ain't working for you. And I wore my own orange shirt because it reminded me of the life I didn't want to have for myself. No disrespect to the men and women who I work with, but I didn't want that life for me. But one summer I was working, like many of you, working, going to summer school at the time, and tired. And one of the gentlemen in this crew I worked with, about 4 or 5 men, and these were hard men, right? These are guys who usually drank their lunch when we had a half hour, if you get what I'm saying. So one day we're talking, and one of the guys looked at me, one of the men said, I don't understand why you're in college. That's a waste of time. He says, you know what? I get paid every 2 weeks, and my paycheck talks to me. Well, being sort of a shy person at the time, I didn't have a response. But one of the other men in the crew, who never talked, spoke up and said, leave that young boy alone. He's going to college, and someday his paycheck going to scream at him. Yours just talks. His going to scream. And it was an example again of how all kinds of folk, right, can, if you speak aloud your dreams, you have a plan for yourself, other people will buy in and speak to that dream for you. But you can't just do it for yourself. As I mentioned, 2 of my big motivations were my mother and my grandmother. I knew the only way my grandmother could see me on television was if I worked at a major network. It wouldn't be enough to work in local television. Though I worked in local television for 15 years. So I wanted to make my mama proud, and I wanted my grandmama to be able to see me on television. And that's what my baseline motivation for wanting to get to 60 Minutes, which in my profession is considered kind of the top of the pile for broadcast journalism. So my friends, please know you can't just do it for yourself. That it has to be about your big and bold dream for your life. It has to be about somebody else, someone else. In fact, the great philosopher, Deion Sanders, said at his recent Hall of Fame induction ceremony, he said, Deion said, only the way Deion Sanders can speak. Deion says, if your dream doesn't include other people, your dream isn't big enough. I like that. The great poet Maya Angelou wrote a poem that said, Still I Rise. It was a poem aimed directly, mostly, for an African American audience. But I think in many ways it speaks to all of us. Because all of us are the sons and daughters of immigrants, right? All of us can tell the story somewhere in our family of people who struggled and who dreamed of the promise of America. And please know, as a journalist, I am a paid skeptic. It's my job to go places and, as they say, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. To ask hard questions of our political leaders. To ask questions about business practices and those kinds of things. But please know, of all the places that I've seen, of all the places I've traveled and things that I know, America is the greatest country on earth.
Oh, yeah.
Only in America. Only in America, where you're from doesn't determine where you'll go. Young people know this. If you love America, she'll love you back. If you're good to her, she'll be good to you. Maya Angelou wrote this poem, again, primarily to African Americans. There's this line in the poem, Still I Rise, where she says, "You are the hope and the dream of the slave." I like that. What she was saying to her audience was that there are people who look like you. After a day of back-breaking, humiliating work, where they were treated like animals, that those folk would lay down and close their eyes and dream of you. Young people, all of us, I would imagine in this room, somewhere in your family tree, there are people who struggle. As hard as you may think it is for you, think back, I would imagine, to your grandparents, to your great-grandparents, to their parents, where they came from, the struggles that they had. And consider this in those difficult moments for you, that in your family, your loved ones, relatives you've never met, but after days of back-breaking, difficult work, they would close their eyes in their modest home and dream of you. When I came here today, I always like to sort of look around at the community that institutions are placed in. And I was coming here, I noticed that there are some nice neighborhoods around here, and I saw what I thought were a couple of hard-scrabble neighborhoods. And so I would imagine students, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, as you go about your day and you're going to the convenience store off campus, you're at the mall, you're someplace off campus, know that there are young people who see you and dream of you because of the difficulties they face in their life. For instance, in Toledo, Ohio, a city much like Buffalo, much like Baltimore, 60% of the students who go to public school in Toledo, Ohio, come from non-parent households. Non-parent. That means they don't live with their mother or father. They're either in foster care, raised by a grandparent, live with a sibling, an aunt, uncle, a friend. No parent households. Can you imagine? I mean, I know how difficult it was for a single parent to raise 3 kids by herself. I can't imagine the hardships for children who were raised without either parent. I was in Baltimore, my beloved hometown, a few years back, talking to a middle school. It's a charter school in East Baltimore. We all know much has been written and said about charter schools and what that means to the education system in our country. And at that charter school in Baltimore, and I was done talking to students and, signed a couple autographs and talking to kids. There was this beautiful 11-year-old girl, about that time, who waited patiently to speak with me. I'm a paid observer, so I observe people in their body language. And I was struck by how gentle her spirit was, and how polite she was. And she waited patiently after the faculty members, the adults, her classmates spoke to me. And she said, "Hello, Mr. Pitts. My name is Pilo. May I ask you a question?" "Sure, sweetheart. What's your question?" 11-year-old girl. She said, "Mr. Pitts, I heard your story about your childhood. I have one question for you, sir. Where did you go? Where did you hide when the world hurt too much?" My friends, no child in the most powerful country on earth should ever ask that question. But they do. In Pilar's case, she was in foster care. She was in an abusive situation and was reaching out for help. And as it turned out, I told one of her advisors who got her help, Pilar is in a better situation. We've remained pen pals. Pilar is now in high school. She has dreams of college. But I tell you the story for this reason. Where you are right now, whether you are soon to be on academic probation, whether you are the lead student in your class, there are people in this world who need you. There are people in your life who are asking the question, where do I go? Where do I hide when the world hurts too much. And my friends, whether you are 17 or 70, you have to be that person to answer that question, to be that place where they can go, where they can hide when the world hurts too much. Thank you so much. I've been so blessed my entire life, right? Not lucky, I don't believe in luck, but I've been blessed because countless people have helped me out. So I believe I have a responsibility to pay it forward, right? So, here's my email address. If ever I can help you in some way, make a recommendation, you want, someone other than a professor or a parent to talk to about something, feel free. I travel a lot. I'm on the road about 2 weeks a month, 2 or 3 weeks a month. But I'm good about responding to emails. Please know, if I don't answer your email within 15 minutes, because normally I do, that means I'm someplace speaking like this. Or I could be out of the country, but I will get back with you. And if for some reason you email me, I don't get back to you within 48 hours, email me again. Okay? Because I'm 50 now. And for those in the room who are over the age of 18, you know how sometimes we forget things, right? Anyway, here's my email address. My email address is Byron P. B-Y-R-O-N, P is in Pittsburgh, Byron P at CBS News. Okay? And trust me, there are hundreds of college students around the world, around the country, who email me from time to time, who ask a specific question, like about an internship or something else, or whatever. And if I can help, know that I'd be honored to help you. Okay? All right. Questions? Here's a microphone here, if you have questions. Thank you, Medaille. Please, everyone, keep it down. Yes, ma'am.
If there was one thing you could do differently, what would it be?
If there's one thing I could do differently, what would it be? That's a good question. I'm not as I mentioned earlier, I am an optimistic person by choice. And it is a hard-earned choice, right? Someone asked the Dalai Lama once how he felt about the future of his people. And the Dalai Lama said, I am optimistic. He said, how can you possibly be optimistic based on what's happened to you?